All right, thanks. I'm Nitesh Sanjani. This is Billy Rios. And, we're not too formal. So if you have any questions at any point during the presentation, just raise up your hand and, we'll call you out. Okay. Or we'll have QA at the end, too. Right? Either way, yeah. So before we get into the meat of the presentation, let's take a couple of minutes and talk about why phishing is a problem that we should really be worried about. The number one answer to that question is money. According to Gartner, phishing cost the industry about $3.2 billion in 2007, and that's a significant amount of money. That amount is projected to go up quite a lot this year. So that's the no-brainer answer to why we should be worried about phishing. The second thing, and I think to me personally, this is more important, and it's something that we don't talk about when we talk about the cost of phishing, is the stress factor that everyday people go through when they are phished or when their identity is compromised. If somebody compromises your identity through phishing or whatever, they can open up credit cards in your name, thereby destroying your credit rating, accept employment as if they were you, and essentially become you. And if you were to walk into a Social Security office in the U.S. and try to change your Social Security number to combat that, well, good luck, because you're going to go through a lot of hassle to get your situation right. So one of the things that people don't talk about when they talk about the cost of phishing is the stress factor that everyday people go through. So everybody is affected by this situation. As Billy and I started to brainstorm about what we want to research upon phishing, this happened about sometime in October, November of last year, we asked ourselves, well, let's just go out there and look at what research has already been done. And when we looked at some of the research that's already been done, we were really envious of all the pretty bar charts and the pretty pie charts that everybody had up there. So what we wanted to do for you guys is to come up with something like a pie chart that if you could take away from this presentation, that would be one thing you would take away. And so we really worked hard upon it, and this is what we came up with. This pie chart is the pie chart. The stuff in yellow is Pac-Man. So it's about 67% of the pie chart is Pac-Man. So that should probably drive home our feelings on charts and statistical data. I think in all seriousness, I think it's important, but I think we have too much of that already when it comes to phishing. I mean, just Google for phishing. You'll find a lot of white papers on data like where are these phishers coming from, how many websites do they set up per day, per month, per year. This is really good information, but I think we need to go beyond that.
At the same time, I think this is probably the most powerful pie chart you will ever see in your life. So take a good look at it.
What's the current landscape when it comes to phishing, right? It's whack-a-mole. If you're the CIO or CEO or CFO or CSO, and you find out, get a call at midnight, or you walk into your office, the first thing you're told is, we've been hit by a phishing attack. What that means is there are hundreds of websites out there with the same logo, with the same content like our website, and we need to shut these down. If this is what you're hearing as an executive, what you will end up doing is concentrating most of your effort in finding out where these phishing sites are, calling up the ISPs, and requesting them to shut down those machines. That is going to be 80 or 90% of your effort today in business. So if you look at that landscape, I think what you can say is it's a whack-a-mole situation. So what does that mean from the landscape perspective? It means that businesses feel out of control. I mean, I had this experience with a client that was recently hit by a phishing attack. And the CSO pulled everybody into a room and said, I have $20 million in my budget. I can spend it however I like. So you can take all the money. The money is not an object. Just make this problem go away. And of course, the response to that was, we can't make this problem go away. It doesn't matter how much money you have. So businesses feel out of control. Legal authorities feel out of control. I mean, if you go up to an FBI agent and call up the FBI and say, here are some IP addresses, here are some machines that are hosting a phishing site belonging to targeting my business, the FBI will probably be able to do a better job of helping you if those machines are physically present in the United States. But now you take a situation where these machines are not present in the United States, and it's a whole different ballgame. There's less the legal authorities in the U.S. can do for you. So the legal authorities feel out of control. And the people, everyday people, like, my grandmother, for example, I can teach her how to look at the browser window, and if she sees a green bar, I can tell her, well, you're okay. That sort of an education is acceptable, but unfortunately, the tools we have today are not enough. So the expectations for users to distinguish fraudulent sites from real sites is so high that users feel out of control. So we have this situation where, from the perspective of technology, everybody feels out of control. And as we started thinking about this problem, we kind of had this hunch that what we know about phishing, from the stuff we saw out there, we had this hunch that what we know about phishing is just the tip of the iceberg. That there is probably some sort of an ecosystem that, when Billy takes over, it'll be clear to you what I mean by that, that supports all of this. And so we had this hunch, and we decided to kind of uncover the iceberg and see what else is there. And so, as we started, we said, instead of picking apart data and statistics, let's go after answering questions like, are these phishers the real Einsteinian ninja hackers that the media makes them out to be? What happens to the data once a phisher gets hold of it? How do they communicate with each other? What sorts of tools do they use? I think last week when Billy and I were talking, he put it really well. We want to look at this problem not from the perspective of outside in, but from the phisher looking inside out. And that's, I think, something that we have done in this presentation. So as we got started, we said, well, how do we get started? How do we play around and kind of uncover this phishing ecosystem? We said, well, let's ask ourselves, what do the phishers want? What's the target? What are they after? Well, that was clear. The phishers are after the good fish, the happy-go-lucky fish, the cute fish, the average internet user who can't tell a fraudulent site from a good site. That's what the phishers were after. So now we understand, what these guys are after. Now, of course, since Billy and I are really good-looking men and we want to preserve our masculinity, we couldn't be the pretty cute fish that the phishers want. What we really want to do is be the bad fish, the manly fish, the ugly fish, the sexist fish. Instead of giving these phishers what they really want, what we wanted to do is hook onto their trails and see where that leads us.
We are indeed the nastiest fish on the internet. No one wants to catch us. And if you see us in your net, you've got a lot of trouble, I think.
All right, so this is an example of a phishing site, and so we'll just dive into it and give you an idea of what sorts of people we're dealing with when we talk about phishers. Here's a website that's trying to look like a Hotmail or Windows Live sign-in page. Pretty straightforward, right? Like a phishing site. And so what we did is we filled in some data and clicked on submit, and we intercepted the post request that happened, and we realized that the post request has these two weird parameters that are hard-coded. And we also realized that this post request was being submitted to guestbookdepot.com, which was, when you think about it, it just doesn't make sense. So we went to guestbookdepot.com. What? Is this better? Told me earlier.
I'll give this check. You're the man.
So we went to guestbookdepot.com to kind of see what that looks like. And this is what we saw. And it was clear to me. It kind of reminded me of my old 1995 crappy homepage internet days. Where you would set up this homepage and you would email your mom at AOL and say, check out my homepage. And then you would have this crappy link below it that says, sign my guestbook. And things like Guestbook Depot would support that function. And Guestbook Depot still exists. And so what we did is we said, okay, the Guestbook Depot, this guy probably has a guestbook up, and we already know what the parameters are to access this guestbook. We intercepted that with the post request. This is the post request again. So we kind of went back to Guestbook Depot and submitted, that ID of that guestbook. And so what we ended up seeing was really what the Fisher was doing in this case is taking all the victim's data, and instead of writing a script to capture it and email it to him, he was just having it being posted to Guestbook Depot. So if you know the right guestbook to look at, you have a lot of people's Hotmail account information in there. And how many do we get? It's
there's tons.
59,000. There are just 59,000 Hotmail and Yahoo accounts on a public guestbook.
Right. We showed the live.com portal, but we also realized on this same exact server was another portal that looked like Yahoo, and there may have been another one on there as well.
Yeah.
So they're kind of multitasking, maximizing returns.
So what this basically tells you is Phishers want to kind of patch things together, so they have to do the least amount of work to get the most out of it. Now, there's no authentication component here. Anybody could have figured this out. So from the perspective of are these Phishers really that sophisticated, the answer, the hunch at this point is no. So kind of going back to where we started, as we started our research, we said, well, if we want to study more phishing sites like this, where do we begin? How do we find where these phishing sites are? We thought about a spam folder, but spam folders, you get so much spam that is not phishing, and so it's kind of hard to distinguish. So we said, well, let's go to something like PhishTank. PhishTank is a community-driven service that a lot of anti-phishing plugins feed off from, where you can go into PhishTank if you find a phishing site, say, share it with the rest of the people to say, here's a phishing site, don't go here or there. So we kind of started with PhishTank to say, as we came up with websites to study from a phishing perspective. We also looked at this, which is the Google anti-phishing blacklist. The anti-phishing plugin supported by Google that's a part of the Firefox browser feeds off of a blacklist like this. And one of the things we notice is, you probably can't see it, it's in a red box above, is there's an FTP : // So a Fisher had set up a website using FTP and passed around this URL. And what the guy or girl did was he hacked into the administrator account and started put the phishing site over there, and then created a URL like FTP : / administrator : the password at the IP address. And as people started realizing that this is a phishing site, it got picked up by the Google anti-phishing blacklist. And so the poor guy who owns that FTP server not only got his FTP server hacked into, but now the whole world knows his administrator password. So I think from a double-edged sword perspective, there's some negative sides to having a blacklist, because as you'll see, phishers are really lazy. If you are Fisher number one and you go hack up a server and set up a phishing site, as we'll see later, you probably will not spend too much of an effort patching that server. So if I'm Fisher number two and I'm more lazier than you are, I'll just go look at a blacklist or PhishTank, because I know now I have a list of IP addresses that are easily hackable and have not been patched. So Fisher number one has already done the dirty work for me. So here's another site we landed upon that was a phishing site that was targeting a company. And the next slide is, so what we did as we went to the phishing site is we then force browsed just to the host name, removed everything after the host name, and force browsed to the host name. And this is what we found. It was an AppServe project for Windows, an open source UI web-based component that kind of lets you administrate the server. The two things could have happened here. Either the Fisher compromised this machine and set this up so he or she can have access to it. But I think what really happened is, as you go to the next slide, that link points to a PHP MyAdmin installation, which is really a web-based front end for MySQL. So I think what really happened in this case is the guy who set up this server also set up PHP MyAdmin and forgot to password protect it. a fisher realized this and used this, because this gives you root access to the MySQL server and can end up launching commands. Use this to kind of compromise the server. And of course, as we noticed before, the fisher did nothing to patch the server up so nobody else can get access to it. Here's a banking site. This is a phishing site. And we did the same thing. We first browsed to the actual host name, and this is the actual innocent site that was hacked into to host the banking site. One of the things we realized when we went to hostname/images,
So knowing this, we've seen one example where we backed up to just the host name. We did it again. We noticed that there's an image directory. So this is where we started to become the bad fish, right? That's me right there.
The nasty fish, right? So here's the images directory. So basically they have indexing turned on off, which basically means that if they don't have an index page, you see the contents of the directory. Kind of looked at all the files, and one file kind of struck our attention. Is the PHP file, because whenever you see PHP and phishing, it's bad. So we clicked on the PHP file, and here's what we saw. It was essentially a backdoor. The guy or girl who had compromised the server uploaded the PHP file, which, as you can see it in the screenshot, but as you scroll down, you can type in the commands you want to execute. Basically a web-based shell to the system. And yet again, whoever uploaded this did nothing to password protect it from other people. And so we went back to Google Cache, kind of looked at the site some more, and what we got access to now is the back-end PHP script. That's what you're seeing here. Here's what the back-end PHP script is. If you look at what it takes to set up a phishing site, there are two components: the client-side components, the HTML, the JavaScript, the images that make the site look like, a financial institution site or whatever. And then you have the back-end script, which is, in this case, a PHP script. When the victim submits his or her information and clicks on submit, this script takes over on the server side, packages up into a nice email, and then emails the phisher the information that the victim submitted. So this is exactly that script. Now, in the red box, one of the things we noticed is as this email is being composed to be sent to the phisher, there was this word with result with hyphens surrounded it. And so we thought, that's kind of a unique string. So let's keep that thought in mind. I'll come back to that. Here's a continuation of that same PHP script. And here we introduce you to our Fisher celebrity number one, Mr. Pedro8doc@gmail.com. That's his email address hard-coded into the PHP script. So this is the guy who's actually getting all the information that people are submitting. One of the things we noticed is, you'll notice, and as we kind of look below in that red box, is there's the mail function being invoked more than once. If you write a simple PHP script that is about to send out an email, you need to really invoke the mail function just once. And Pedro is doing it more than once. And so the first time, the first time he does it, in the first parameter, which is supposed to be the email, he includes an empty string. So we kind of looked at this and said, well, is Pedro stupid, or is he confused, or what's going on over here? This is weird. And when Billy takes over, we'll come back to this and it'll make a lot more sense to you. So going back to the string that we talked about, the unique string, what would you do if you've come across a unique string and want to see where else it exists? You would Google it. Because Google knows everything, right? And so as we Googled it, before we Googled it, we thought to ourselves, you know what we're going to get? I'll tell you what we're going to get. What we are going to get is other servers that have the same PHP script. We thought we were being really ingenious by thinking about this, right? So we put in that string result with hyphens and press search. And what came back, I think I'm still traumatized by what came back. What came back was not other servers that hosted this PHP script, but the actual victim's information that was being shared on public message boards across the world, no authentication required. I mean, at this point, this is the search summary. I haven't even clicked on anything yet, and I'm looking at people's social security numbers, ATM pins, and bank account usernames and things like that. Yeah. So we clicked on one of these links, and it kind of took us to this site in Arabic. And of course, I don't want to pick on this message board, though it's one of our favorites. There were 10 or 15 others like this. So let me kind of show you what's going on over here. This guy is sharing one person's identity that he has captured from a phishing attack. Where the account was opened, the online ID, the passcode, the ATM pin, SSN, bank account number, bank routing number, last 8 ATM digits, email address, cardholder name, address, city, state, zip code, phone number, credit card number, expiration date, year, CVV, mother's maiden name, and father's maiden name.
The father's maiden name. You cannot successfully conduct identity theft unless you have the father's maiden name. Definitely.
You want to take it from here?
Yeah. There's date of birth, and then there's IP. So these guys are pretty good. They knew, they've got one shot to catch this fish, and they took everything. They took everything in one shot. People are going to give the information. Why not take it? So they took everything. So I do want to say something real quick. I know it's really early, and last night was probably really late for a lot of people. So if you're falling asleep and you get beamed by one of these, it's not my fault. But, we decided to poke around more on this particular website, and we saw a lot of account information on that one page. We showed you one person's account information, but there's probably 30, maybe 40 of that on there. And it kind of confused us. We were curious as to why someone would steal some people's identities, all the information they need to steal the identity, and then put it in a public place where you don't need authentication, you don't need a secret handshake, we didn't need to join this forum or anything like that. It was just there. We just happened to stumble across it because we knew the right Google keywords to type into the search engine, and the search engine returned us places that the crawler had said, hey, this is on here, this is relevant. You should look at this. So that's what we did.
And some of that information on that thread was about 3 hour fresh. I mean, it was something you could really use at that point.
Right. So we started poking around because it seemed like a pretty interesting site. It's got people's identities on it, right? So what else is on here? And we noticed this. And so, I mean, obviously, you can read all this stuff. We could as well. And we knew that this was really bad. Well, actually, the truth is we can't read Arabic. I don't know anyone that speaks or reads Arabic, and so we were kind of confused, scratching our heads. So we went back to our favorite tool and said, hey, maybe we should just translate this through Google, and they're helping us so much. We should just use their translate.
Google is great.
Right, it's awesome.
I love Google.
Definitely. So we took it, we decided, hey, let's translate this page and see what it means. And this is what we came back with. And so there's a lot of credit card fraud that's going on here. It's pretty blatant. The title of the forums, the title of some of the places that you can go to are basically credit card fraud. It says, here's check CVVs, here's how you check limits, here's how you check to see if the credit card number that you stole is real, here's how you check bank names and card types, here's where you can get visas, here's where you can do this, here's where you can do that. And it seemed like it's a pretty crazy site. Once again, though, there's no authentication needed to get to this site. There's no secret handshake, there's no secret password. We didn't need to register for this site. We didn't need to walk through any kind of vetting process for these people to allow us access to this information. It's just out there. There's other stuff out there, too. We show you this because this is a list of tools that people can download. And the reason we show this is because we get a lot of questions about this kind of stuff. And someone said, hey, what I always do is I always take a bunch of fake credit card numbers and I post it to these phishing sites and I totally screw them up and they'll never be able to operate again. And from what we're seeing up to this point, these people aren't really that sophisticated, but they have a lot of people helping them. So there's an ecosystem, basically, that's kind of supporting these people. So maybe they may not know how to code PHP or how to properly invoke the Mail API. Maybe they don't know how to code tools like this, but there are people out there coding tools like this for them. And so some of the tools that we see here are ways to validate whether or not a credit card number is real. We saw other tools that would validate that the limit, what the limit is. It would validate that the credit card number is still alive. Maybe it's shut down or something else. There's a lot of tools out there for these people to use. They don't have to create this themselves. And so that's why we wanted to show this screenshot right here. In addition, we took a look around on this particular forum. We saw other things as well. So here was a list of websites that maybe or may, I don't know if they intentionally did this, but they probably didn't mean to have this. These MDB files are actually database files, and they have it accessible in the web root. So they have some logic in their web application. They're writing their customers' data into a database, and the database file is downloadable from the internet.
Yeah, and one thing I'm sorry I forgot to mention, and we still talk about this today, is the time between when Billy and I started to look at the phishing sites, when we started from Fish Tank, picked up a banking site, looked at that Pedro PHP script, and landed here, it was a matter of 15 minutes.
Right.
Right? So that's something to keep in mind from the perspective.
Right. 15 minutes from IM window, like, hey, we should do this, to about 100 identities. So we poked around. We talked to some people on these forums. We may or may not have said that we were fishers, disappointed with our day jobs as people who cut grass on the weekends, and we wanted to make money. And so we were asking people, how can we be elite like you? How can we be elite fishers like you? And they gave us some resources. They're like, oh, yeah, I remember when I was your age, just coming up in the fishing industry. Let me help you out. So one of the websites we got pointed to was this place right here. This is basically a Carter website. And what kind of blew us away even more was, once again, there's no authentication needed to access this particular forum. And the way that people are advertising their services and their goods is very, very blatant. So it's not like there's code words where they say, oh, I've got the goods, contact me at, some weird address. It's just really blatant. It's saying, hey, you know what? I'm selling credit card numbers. I've got bank account information. Contact me by email. Here's my email. There's no PGP encryption. There's no, send this code word. There's none of that. It's just, I've got it. If you want it, just contact me. Send me an email. That's all it takes.
And you can find, these email addresses on these message boards really fast. And this guy, for example, is on Yahoo. You could probably add him to your Yahoo buddy list and start chatting with them. They're really nice to talk to. And they'll start gossiping with you about other fishers, say, you got to buy with me and things like that. So they're really nice, but watch out. It may be a Fed on the other end.
Right, definitely. So. Be very careful. Or maybe us on the other end.
Yeah,
So I charmed one fisher. I said, I'm just sick and tired of cutting grass. Summertime's here. It's just hot outside. I only make $5 per lawn that I cut. I really need some way to make a lot more money. And so this guy said, hey, send me $1,500 and I'll send you these fishing kits. And I said, it's going to take me 7 years of cutting grass to get $1,500 for you. Is there anything else we can do? And the guy said, give me 1 second. I'll hook you up. And so later on he came back and he gave me this URL. And he said, go ahead and take whatever you want. So I went there, right? And so we see that directory indexing is also available for this website that he set up. He set it up on a place, where he could just set up a website and post stuff, basically anonymously. He didn't give me a password. He didn't give me any kind of special stuff. He just pointed me to this thing, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of crazy stuff in here. So what do? I download all of it, right? I'm like, oh, yeah, this is sweet. So this is my folder here after I download all the stuff that was in that directory. So this is one person giving who this guy thinks is probably a really young guy fishing kits. And so did he give me one fishing kit? Did he say, hey, what website are you looking for? Here's a site. If you need any more, come back. No, it wasn't like that. He said, here's a site. Take whatever you want. And if you look at what I've downloaded, it's pretty much every organization that you can think of. They have a fishing kit inside of this thing that he had given me. So in one fell swoop, one fisher handing off this many kits to another fisher just put all these other organizations at risk. Look how many organizations are on there. So, for all this guy knows, I really am a 15-year-old kid who just wants to make a quick buck. And what he's doing is helping this 15-year-old kid, who he thinks is me, attack organizations, financial organizations that transfer a lot of money. And that's pretty alarming. There's no vetting. There's no secret handshake. Once again, there's nothing like that. The guy gave me the URL. I went to the URL and I downloaded stuff. If you take a look inside this folder as well, sprinkled throughout is some tools. I think there's a spam tool in there and some other weird tools. So it's like those basic tools of the trade where, hey, you're going to need this too if you're going to try to pull some stuff like this off. So being the curious sort, we decided to take a look at what's inside of one of these kits. And we had a sneak peek from the one server that we had viewed before, but this gives us a better understanding of what is actually in a phishing kit. So we actually unzipped this particular kit. There's no reason why we picked this particular organization. They're pretty much all the same. And we noticed just what Nitesh had said earlier, that there is a client-side component, the part that makes it look like it's an actual financial institution or an organization, and then there's one file, a PHP file for the most part, most of the time, that's going to do all the heavy lifting. So when people are faked out and they think they're on the right site, their financial institution or whatever, they've entered their information, there's going to be one file that basically does all the heavy lifting to take the data that the customer or the user or the person that's getting phished is giving to them and get it to wherever it is that it needs to go to, so where the phisher can access it and use that information. So we're not going to take too deep of a look into the HTML and the client-side stuff, but we do want to take a look at that PHP file, right? We want to see what that thing's doing. And so we open it up, and we see almost exactly what we saw before on the other website. It's basically one long string that's just being concatenated together. They're capturing all the post requests. They're taking all the information at once. This is not, a multi-step process where they're trying to get a little bit here. They're just trying to take everything at once. And so we also see some identifying strings. And then at the very bottom, we see the same thing where the mail API is being called. And basically all the Phisher has to do is take out the string that is in the recipient variable and put in their own email address in there and deploy it on a server, and then they're good to go. We did notice a couple weird things here. We noticed that there's this array up here. And we also noticed that just like Pedro, our favorite guy, there's actually a mail API, and the mail API was actually being called twice, right? And so that's why we kind of highlight that there. So, but the first time the mail API was being called, it was actually being called with a variable called CC. And so, does anyone read PHP in here at all? I know it's kind of tough to see, but does anyone know what's going on here at all? What's that? That is exactly right. So the address of the person who created this kit is actually obfuscated into this array here. We'll throw this guy out like a ball here. Oh. So what we kind of noticed was, the obfuscation is, I guess, kind of decent. But this is pretty ghetto. It's like right in front of where the mail API is being called, and there's not really anything that's being done to hide this, And me and Nitesh started arguing like, well, if I was going to obfuscate my email address, this is how I would do it. I would do it via an include, and they would have to download it. But so if you take a look at this, this is not very sophisticated. And if you have even a basic understanding of how PHP works, even if you have a basic understanding of programming, you understand that there's an array. The array is getting populated with certain values, and then later on the values of the array are being used to create some variable. When I looked at it, I said, I want to know what's in that array. I mean, obviously the mail API is being called with that value. And so it was actually the person who created the kit. So the guy I thought was my buddy, who sent me all these kits out of the kindness of his heart, was actually trying to steal the credit card information that he thought I was going to steal. So I was kind of depressed for a couple days. Me and Nitesh went out drinking.
And what do you call that?
Well, I call this Fisher on Fisher crime, but I don't know if there's another term for it. So.
Yeah, and I hate to be too negative. I mean, we kind of like when we went out drinking, we said, well, let's not stop being so negative. And,
right.
For example, go back to poor Pedro. I mean, we can't pick on Pedro all the time. What he probably did is he kind of realized there's something fishy going on here.
Fishy.
And instead of $CC, he didn't know what he was doing. He said, well, if I take this out, will my phishing site stop working? So you got to cut him some slack. I mean, he kind of put the empty string into a $CC.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, after much drinking, Nitesh finally shakes the depression out of me, and we decide to continue our research. And then we go to another forum. And I really, really love this one here. This guy is saying, hey, I'm a rock star. I can get stuff for free. All you need to do is just do this thing. It's a trick. Trust me, it works. There's this huge bug on the server. Here it is. There's a big bug in the server. People's credit card information's at risk. And so naturally my ears kind of perk up. I'm like, oh, wow, this is kind of cool. And he goes, hey, you can basically use this bug in a Yahoo server and get the credit card number of someone who's been recently shopping on that server. And so basically what he said is, every customer has to register. They have to put their information in there, blah, blah, blah. It's a gold mine. And I keep reading further, and he goes, this is what you have to do. And so this image is kind of tough to see because in reality, the instructions he was giving were very complicated. So that's why I was like, wow, this is pretty interesting. He says, you got to craft this message, you got to use this certain string at the very top, and then you got to use this boundary, and then you have to put this content type in here, and then it has to be this specific content type. It has to be line 4, and it has to do this. And then what you do is you take a credit card number that you know is good, and you put it in this line right here. It's like, huh. And then he says, and then you take the name on that credit card number, and it's got to be in lowercase. He said, you see, it has to be in lowercase. This is line 11. Put this here, then put this delimiter here, and he goes on. So then the CVV needs to go here, blah, blah, blah. It's like, wow. And then it goes on. It goes on and on and on and on. And so I'm like, geez, this is crazy. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this cannot be legit, right? So, and then we get to the kicker. He goes, once you've crafted this message, you send it to server4mailbot88@yahoo.com, and you use this subject, because that subject line will confuse the server. Like, whew. And so, I was showing Natasha, and we were just like, this is ridiculous. This is just the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And then you start seeing responses like, hey, it doesn't work. I tried it. I'm not getting any responses. I'm not getting any responses back from the mail server. I don't know what's going on. And then the guy was bold enough to be like, you did it wrong. Try it again with a different credit card number.
Yeah, with a different credit card number.
It's like, oh, man. So a lot of Fisher-on-Fisher crime going on out there. And it's not very sophisticated. Obviously, these are fishers getting fished. Very, very simple phishing scams, and they're giving up the credit card numbers that they've stolen. We've come across some other stuff as well. And this is kind of an indication that there's phishing. There's definitely phishing. But what we also noticed is that there's a lot of pieces that are tied together. And so if you take a look at this site right here, this is actually for what's called a dump. And I think the term for it is like fools or whatever. So basically what these guys are doing is they have credit card numbers and stuff, but they're selling it. So it's kind of tough to see what the prices here are. But let's take a look at what some of the prices are. If you have a bank account that you've stolen or you want to purchase one, basically what you do is you pay 1 to 2% of what the available balance is for the bank account that you want. And so, and if you want a certain type of bank, maybe it costs a little bit more. And if you want, certain countries, maybe it costs a little bit more, maybe it costs a little bit less. If you want CVVs, if you want all this other stuff, here's all the prices basically. We did notice something that European countries seem to go at a premium for over American, credit card numbers and such. And there's a lot of discussion as to why that is, but that's kind of the trend that we saw overall. We saw this also. I had completed the PCI training a long time ago, and this guy is actually, I don't know if this guy's PCI certified or not, but he's saying, hey, you know what? It's a violation of the merchant agreement to store the CVV on the server. Like if you have a database, you cannot store the CVV in the database. And he goes, and if you do, there could be fines starting around $10,000, and it moves up depending on the severity. And so I said, this is a pretty responsible guy. And then, in the next sentence, he goes, I sell US, UK CVVs, and if you need to buy one, I have one for $3 for MasterCard or Visa, $5 for MasterCard, $7 for Amex. And then here's where we see eGold. I think they got into a little bit of trouble lately. And then there's actually another one. So eGold, for some reason, is not the only method of anonymous payment. There are other methods of anonymous payment that people are using. And so maybe eGold gets shut down, or they stop doing facilitating this kind of stuff, and maybe people will move somewhere else. But there's also something else that's very important to see, is that just like before, when we saw people's account information in the public for anyone to see, if you take a look at the last line that's on here, in addition to the guy's Yahoo Instant Messenger, which we chatted with him, he's a pretty cool guy, there's also this 185 Miss Sophie. What we're not showing you is, starting from that piece down, is other people's account information. And so here's where we have here again, where we have these fishers who are trying to sell information, trying to steal information that they've stolen. And what they're doing is they're posting some of the information that they have to just a public place for everyone to see and steal. And so,
yeah, it's almost like how you get street cred.
Right.
This guy is posting somebody's identity, like we saw on the Arabic site, for no reason. It has no context, but it's there to show off to the other fishers that you are legit. We saw cases where in message board threads like this, where somebody would ask a question like, hey, are you around? I haven't seen you for a while. And the guy would respond back with just a yes, I'm here. And then for no reason, post somebody else's identity right after it to prove to the rest of the community that he is, a well-known fisher.
Right, definitely. It's pretty scary. We also got a lot of questions as to, what kind of bulk are we dealing with here? How many people's credit card or personal information is getting sold back and forth, back and forth? And that's that's something that's very difficult to track. As you know, we're very good with statistics and charts, and so we didn't create one, but I think this may give an indication of maybe some of the bulk, some of the transactions that are being conducted over the internet. This guy right here has a special sale, so if you need to buy credit card numbers, now's the time to do it because the sale's going to end pretty soon. But if you see the numbers that he's dealing with, it's 100 US Visa Platinum Gold, and then he has 500 as well. So what happens is they're dealing with pretty significant bulk here. They're dealing with pretty large numbers, especially a site like this. Here's another site. We're just showing you what the costs are. There's actually some costs here on the right-hand side. These are, I think, credit card skimming dumps, but it's pretty interesting. $50 each, different prices for different countries. One thing that we did notice is that there's a lot of, once again, Fisher-on-Fisher crime. So it's difficult to understand who you can trust and who you can do business with because you can get ripped off very easily. So much like phishing lists like what we have to protect ourselves, phishers have lists, blacklists of people who they should not be doing business with either. And so I think this particular list, we're showing you just a sample of it. There's like 3,500 names on this list where these people are saying, if you do business with these guys, they will rip you off, they'll steal your money, they'll steal your identity, blah, blah, blah.
It's like the Fisher bitch list.
But I think these guys are the most interesting personally when you talk to them, but that's just my personal opinion. So here's where it's going to get a little personal. So I get this email a little while ago, and I take a look at it, and it says, hey, you know what? Apparently some guy owes me a lot of money, and what I need to do is call this guy ASAP, and he gives me his contact information. So I sat, and I was actually drinking some beer, and I was watching Generation Kill, you know, hoorah, Marines. So I thought about it, and I was saying, you know what? These guys are kind of like, you know, these guys that come out with AK-47 spam machine guns, and they just start spraying indiscriminately into this crowd of emails and praying that it'll hit an email, you know, and this guy is going to go down. And so what happens is most people, you know, when they see gunfire, you know, gunfire coming towards their email, spam coming towards their email, phishing coming towards their email, they run and hide and they take cover and they, you know, wait for it to go away, and then once it goes away, life is normal, right? But I've been hit. The guy sent an email, a phishing email to my account, so my email address has been hit. So I'm not going to run and take cover. I'm not going to lay down and go into the dark without a fight, right? So I'm going to shoot back, right? So, and I'm not going to shoot back with some small little piece of, you know, I'm going to shoot back. So what I did was I collected as many phishing emails as I could. And I said, hey, you know what? You guys want my account information? Here's my account information. I said, subject, here's the account information you're requesting from me. And I said, please deposit the money into the accounts listed in the Word document you see as soon as possible. And if you see, I'm actually attaching a Word document right there. So before I go on any further, Bruce Dang is going to be giving a talk on some of the malicious Word docs he's seen. It's like the last talk on the second day. It's a really, really, really good talk. He does a lot of analysis on malicious Word, not just Word docs, but Office applications. You should take a look at it. It was kind of my inspiration for this. And so you guys want to see what happens when you open the Word doc? That's what happens when you open the Word doc, right? I'm like, yeah, I got you. But I wasn't satisfied. I was like, how do I know if they opened the Word doc? How do I know if they've opened the Word doc? So what I actually did is I bugged the Word doc. So if anyone opens it, because no one should be opening the Word doc, right? Because my account information's in there. It actually sends a ping back to my server so I know that someone opened it. And so I got a list of a lot of people, right? I'm like, sweet, pretty cool. But I wasn't satisfied, right? So I have this Word doc here, and I said, you know what? I'm never going to give you up. And I'm never going to let you down. I'm never going to do anything to desert you. But, you know, if you seriously want my account information, just click right there on that hyperlink and you'll have it. And so, obviously, the next thing to happen is BAM, right? So, but, you know, me being the guy that I am, I can't just let them go to the Rickroll without me knowing about it. So I bugged that too. So whenever you go to the Rickroll on this particular page, I get notified, right? So these, it's kind of ironic that I'm interested in protecting the identities of the Phishers. It's kind of weird, eh? But these are the guys right here that actually opened the Word doc, got rickrolled, and then clicked the link and got rickrolled again. So these guys have a special place in my heart, and I really, really like these guys here. So there's some other stuff that we saw. We're going to go over this pretty quickly, and I think the reason we go over this is because when we very, very, very first started this research, we saw that there was this ecosystem that was supporting phishing and scamming, basically, and we saw a lot of chatter about ATM skimming. And ATM skimming was actually, it was going on, but it wasn't going on as widespread as it is now. But we saw a lot of information, a lot of chatter going on about ATM skimming. And here's one of the posts that we saw. This is kind of difficult. I'll highlight some of the key parts. This guy's saying, hey, I've got an ATM skimmer for sale. This is what it does. It reads all the track data. It works on this battery that lasts forever. It's like, it's password protected. No one can steal your data once you've skimmed it, blah, blah, blah. So naturally, I reach out and I email this guy and go, oh, dude, you're so elite. I need to be elite like you. What do I need to do to get an ATM skimmer? And this guy responds back and he says, $1,800. I'll give you a skimmer. You can do whatever you need to do. It'll take 10 to 15 days for me to deliver it to you. I don't know whether or not that's legit or not, but this is basically what the ATM skimmer would have cost me. And this is actually a while ago. This is in January. So we also talked to some other people. I got some images of ATM skimmers that they were selling. Here's one of the images that someone had sent me. And then here's another image. It was ATM pin ready to go. The funny thing about this is when the guy first sent me this image, actually, I looked at it and I was like, man, come on, dude, that doesn't look like a real ATM pin. Anyone could see that and know that it's fake. And then like a day later, I was at an ATM and the pin looked exactly like that. And I actually tried to pry the pin out of the ATM, but it was a real pin pad. And and people behind me were just like, what the hell is this guy's problem?
Notice how it's on a FedEx envelope, ready to go.
Right, ready to go, definitely. Here's another pin pad that they're selling. I've seen ones that look exactly like that as well. Just the scale. People are like, what's the scale of these ATM skimmers? Well, that's a lot of skimmers. I mean, that's a ridiculous amount of skimmers. There's the guy's contact information.
ATMskimmers.com is really great. If you go there, they have all these flash movies with music.
Right.
That make it almost look like phishing is a virtue.
Yeah,
it's a good
exactly.
thing.
It's like a guy in a lab coat, and he's like, we produce only the highest quality ATM skimmers. It's really weird. And so I didn't get an actual skimmer, but I got the instruction manual for the skimmer, because the skimmer is actually a pretty complicated piece of equipment. And this guy claims that it has encryption at the chip level. That's the first line. So what that means, I'm not really sure. But it says that, hey, your data is safe from hacking attempts by serial COM port sniffers. So, okay, that's cool. Your data is safe even from electronic reverse engineering attacks that involve doing some of the stuff. And then 12-digit PIN, that's pretty significant. And if someone enters a certain number of incorrect attempts on the PIN, the data on the skimmer is actually erased. So this is the way that skimmers protect the information that they've stolen from other skimmers that may be trying to steal their skimmer and get away with their information. This is the software that's used to run the skimmer. And so, as you can see, they've come around. They're actually using the Ruben-style GUI up there. So everyone should come around to the Ruben-style GUI. I think it's the way of the future. It's definitely a way of the future for ATM skimming. So, and it's got a lot of information that they're capturing. They're capturing not only the credit card information, but the PIN as well. So the skimmer works in conjunction with the PIN pad. Here's just a close-up of some of the information that they're capturing, some of the GUI. So here's some of the options that they have. They can configure the PIN pad to do whatever it is that they want. They can set passwords. They can do all sorts of stuff. It's a pretty good piece of software. And the last piece in the manual, it says, hey, we worked really hard to create this version of the ATM Monster, which was a skimmer that they're selling. We hope that you will use it. We hope that you will like it and use it often. So, Crime Enforcers 2007. So, and actually, I saw something a couple weeks ago. I was at my sister's place. She was having a birthday party for one of her young kids. And I saw this guy right here. I was like, oh, man, this is kind of crazy. And then what I noticed is there's actually an ATM like on the side of the thing. It's like, holy shit. So if you take a closer look, there's actually a fake pin pad and a skimmer attached to this thing. So that's a joke, obviously. But the thing that's kind of alarming is we did see the chatter for this a really long time ago, and now it's becoming really bad. And despite what we're trying to do, it seems like the attacks are becoming more low-tech for some reason. So, all right. Should we jump to conclusions? All right. I think a lot of people view Phishers like this, huh?
Yeah, the Einstein ninja hacker, right?
Breaking into machines, creating these creative attacks, doing weird stuff with PHP, stealing information. But I think the reality is, it's more like this, right?
That's Pedro, by the way.
That's Pedro 8, right? Exactly. Exactly. You want to take this guy?
Sure. So, everybody feels out of control. Let's come back to that scenario where the businesses feel out of control, the people feel out of control, legal authorities feel out of control. And so what do we do about this problem? I think it's time that we look at passwords and static passwords. A lot of people give up on two-factor authentication because you need hardware tokens and it's so expensive. But there are alternatives. There's the poor man's two-factor authentication systems using SMS or emails and persistent cookies that can be used. So I think it's time we stop saying that two-factor is too expensive and look at other alternatives. And one of the things that came out of this presentation, as you saw, we started off with Fish Tank. We started off, we're just kind of looking at pie charts. And then we ended up at phishing sites. We ended up at looking at phishing kits, which led us to ATM skimming and, Fisher on Fisher crime and things like that. So there's a chain of links. There's the entire ecosystem that's supported by these phishers. Phishing is not the only thing that's going on within this ecosystem. So I think that kind of a perspective is really important. Okay. Yeah, skip this. So one thing is from a philosophical perspective and a technical perspective, what do we think about phishing, right? And I personally feel that the root cause for phishing is not technology. It's our reliance on static identifiers. So for example, when you're born in the US, you're given a social security number, right? And then as you grow up, your parents ask you to memorize that number and not to give it out to people you don't trust. But then what do? As you grow up, you get a credit card for yourself. You give it out to somebody you don't know. When you get an employment offer, you fill out your social security number, and that gets persisted across database across the world. So you end up giving out your social security number to people you don't even know. And just the reliance on that static identifier that never changes, is your identity. That is the root cause of the problem. We can talk about awareness, which we will. We can talk about browser UI standards. Those are good things, and those are things we need to be thinking about. But if we don't understand the root problem, the things like browser controls and education will end up being a band-aid to the real problem. And I think we need to start thinking about our reliance on static identifiers to correlate to people's identities and pick apart that problem much more than talking about the technological issues. So user awareness, I'm a big fan of user awareness. I think it's really important. That's one thing we should invest in when it comes to phishing. But I also think that some people are lazy and they take it too far. I can't expect my grandmother to know how to parse URLs. That's not awareness. That's not fair to the average user. So that's one thing to keep in mind as we start to build programs around education. What else can we do? I mean, from the stuff that came out of this talk, here's the phishing site, and I'm going to end with this. For targeting a bank, if you look at the view source of the HTML that the phisher set up, you realize that the phisher within the HTML is pointing to resources that still exist on the real bank site. So what can the bank do with this information? If I were this bank, I would look at my logs. The referrer tags to every of this GIF image that's every time it's loaded by a phishing site will tell me the URLs to my phishing sites as they come up. So as I'm playing the whack-a-mole game, I'm playing the game better and faster. It also tells me the IP addresses of my victims. So if I have a limited amount of customers that use the website that's being phished, I can correlate their IP addresses with their account names and inform them. So I think we need to be a little bit more proactive, and the unfortunate thing is that we are going to play the whack-a-mole game for a little bit longer. I am a big supporter of the EV VeriSign SSL certificates, but that's not the only thing that's really going to stop us. We need to kind of zoom back out and look at the root cause of the problem much more. And so with that, we'll open up to questions.
I've got a question for you. In going through your research, and on the message boards and out there in the community, what are the most common ways that people are using this information once they get the credit card numbers or the ATM numbers to actually make some profit?
Yeah, well, they're trading it amongst each other,
right.
And at the end of the day, somebody gets a hold of it that they can use in the U.S., for example, and that's once in a while you'll see your cousin or somebody talk about this weird transaction on the credit card for $4.95 or $3.95, and then you call up MasterCard and they take it off. But so here's how we actually see it in reality: is you kind of see this ecosystem, and I had my mom and myself a couple. I don't think mine was a phishing attack. I hope not. But the fraudulent transactions and we've noticed that these transactions that end up on people's credit cards where they actually use are really a low amount. They're not really high. So a lot of times what these phishers rely on is people who own these credit cards don't take notice. They're like, oh, this is $3 or $4, okay, I'll forget about it. And then you use it again next month.
So is it a lot of use online, or is it actually doing generating a card, for example, off of a skimmed data stream?
I think from a phishing perspective, the skimming world is a totally different world, because you
right.
actually need the physical access. And you have to be local to that area to do something with it. But then we also have the world where the phishers would take the skimming data that's collected, because if you grab a hold of a physical card, the information on that strip will include the CVV number or things like that, where if you just have the credit card number, you don't have all the information you need. And that information is then shipped off to these message boards that are then purchased, and then people end up buying these services online. I've even seen cases where people buy virtual stamps from the U.S. Postal Office. So they're coming up with ideas on how can they use these credit card numbers without being physically found out. Because if you order something from Amazon and you're a phisher, well, now I know where you live. You don't want that, right?
Right. What does the and this may be naive of me, but in terms of getting actual goods shipped to you from an online merchant, in terms of the address variation, is that system totally ineffective in terms of is the bill to same as the ship to?
Can you repeat the question?
Well, like for example, if I steal your credit card number and your address, and you live in California, but I want the goods in Virginia, in terms of, I know that you can enter an address and it always says they're going to do some extra verification. Is that a barrier that you've heard about when you're out there on these sites, or an issue?
Yeah. Well, so you mean the billing address compared to the shipping address?
Exactly.
Right. I think that is slight of a barrier, but usually when in phishing, for example, when the stuff that Pedro collected, the thing we saw on the Arabic message board, has your address and your credit card number. So they try to collect for more than that. For example, the bank phishing site we saw ask you for a bank username, password, your secret question, your credit card number, your shipping address. I mean, your billing address, and all those sorts of things too.
Okay, thank you.
You're talking about the blacklist and sort of Fisher Better Business Bureau. Does the community do anything else to sort of control people who are acting badly? Do they attack one another? Try and take people offline, that sort of thing?
You mean from the fish tank perspective?
Yeah.
I think it's community driven in the sense that when you go to fish tank and you submit a URL, there's actually a community that verifies if the URL is correct or not.
I'm talking inside the Fisher community itself.
It's
inside
a reputation
the message
system.
boards universe.
It's definitely a reputation system. So it's just reputation based, basically, off of whatever identifier, whether it's an email or a handle. Basically, that's how they kind of police themselves.
And the thing you saw with the somebody's identity being on the message for no reason,
right.
It's mostly a taste to kind of show that I know what I'm talking about. We see more of that going on than anything else.
Right.
So one question. Have you seen a lot of combination attacks where when you go to a phishing site, you'll also get a dose of malware while you're there, and then your computer ends up being a Trojan?
Like the Rickroll?
Right. You mean like opening Word documents and getting Rickrolled, or?
Exactly.
I actually did see that. When we were looking around at some phishing sites, there were some phishing sites that had part of Storm on there. But I think a lot of it isn't that sophisticated. It's just a phishing site trying to steal information. I think when you start getting into targeted malware serving, drive-by downloads, that sort of stuff, it gets more sophisticated. That's a different type of person launching those attacks. They have a different mindset. I think they have a different capability than your average, let's say, Phisher.
I mean, if you're an average Phisher and you can just blast out an email with a shabby-looking site and get 10,000 people to submit information, why would you even bother researching, how to use Word or things like that? So from an incentive-based perspective, we haven't really come across too many malware-infested phishing sites, though we have seen it in our professional lives as part of targeted attacks.
Right.
So the reason I was bringing it up is you mentioned that the helpful Phisher who gave you a nice package to install a nice phishing site. I would think that would be a great mechanism for spreading a virus as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's actually I didn't see so much virus stuff, but a lot of it was just stealing information. So like credit card number verifiers, for example, you would run credit card numbers that you had stolen through this credit card number verifier, and then what it would also do is ship those numbers someplace else. So it would verify it for you, and then say, oh yeah, this guy over here that created the tool gets a copy of the numbers as well, whether the guy realizes it or not.
Did you ever figure out the PHP empty string, the first mail example?
All right, let's say thank you to the speakers.